Welcome to Grammar 5i. In this booklet, we will be covering present participial phrases, gerund phrases, and we're going to diagram participial phrases. So let's jump right into present participial phrases. Let's open up our booklet to the front and side cover and walk through that front explanation. At the top, we see a little reminder that a present participial is a verbal that acts like an adjective. Remember the difference between the present participle and gerund. We're going to get into that in a few minutes. And since it is a verbal, it will take on direct objects, PNs, or PAs. Or I should say it can take on direct objects, PNs, and PAs. So let's look at an example at the top of this page. Winning the trophy, the team was humble. Well, we know that winning the trophy is our verbal phrase in this sentence, and we know that we can break down this phrase because there's more than just the participle in it. So we can see that in this phrase, the word trophy is receiving the action of being won, making the trophy the direct object of the participle. But remember, that whole phrase is going to be modifying our subject team within that sentence. So once again, we're noticing that there are functions of speech within a phrase, as well as it has its own function within the sentence. So make sure you're taking your time, and now we're going to look at present participles and gerunds and how they differ and how we can tell the difference between them in two different sentences. We're going to start with this sentence: winning a trophy is fun. Notice in this sentence, winning a trophy, it can't modify anything. There's no noun or pronoun to be modified. And even more, that phrase, winning a trophy, is the subject of the sentence and is being modified by our PA, fun. So it's important to recognize that if there's nothing to be described, then it must be functioning as something. Vice versa, we always need a subject and verb in a sentence, so that is the number one thing to identify, is a subject and a verb. Now, if we contradict this with the next sentence, we have winning the trophy, the team was humble, which we've already looked at before, and we know that team and was is our subject and verb. And in this sentence, winning the trophy is not the subject, and it's also not receiving an action, so it's not functioning as a direct object, and it's also not renaming the team. It's just modifying the team. It's telling us which team is being referred to. So once again, just take your time and notice what each phrase is doing in the sentence, as well as what's going on inside the phrase. Always remember, present participles are describing verbals, gerunds are verbals that act like nouns. Also, a quick note at the bottom, we will put commas after every participial phrase at the beginning of this sentence. This is not always necessary in a sentence, but it is acceptable grammatically. This is not something we are going to get into as to when or why to use a comma versus another time. In this series, we're just going to focus on the phrases themselves. So now let's look at two more examples. We have two sentences, and hopefully this looks very similar to what you've been working on in your booklets, as this is the activity we have you do most often. So let's look at our first sentence. We have Mom read an article describing home decor. Like I mentioned, I suggest that the first thing you do is find your subject and your verb. So in this sentence, we have Mom as our subject, and Mom is completing the action of reading. So read is our verb in this sentence. And then what is being read? What's receiving the action of that verb? The article. So that is our direct object. And then we have the phrase describing home decor. Well, we know that this is not going to be functioning as a noun in this sentence because we already have our subject and direct object, so we obviously can't have a PN in this sentence. So really, what is this phrase doing? It is modifying the article, but within the phrase itself, we have a direct object. Decor is receiving the action of being described. So now that we've identified all the parts of this sentence, we can go ahead and circle modified word, and the modified word is article. That is the thing being described by the participial phrase. Now we can go on to the next sentence. Mom enjoys describing home decor. Once again, I'm going to find my subject and verb first. Mom is my subject, enjoys is my verb, and what is being enjoyed? The whole gerund phrase of describing home decor, meaning that this whole phrase is functioning as a noun. However, if you look at the phrase itself, we know that our verbal, our gerund, is describing an action verb, and decor is receiving that action. So that is the direct object within the phrase, but the entire phrase is functioning as the direct object within the sentence. So once again, make sure you're going slowly through these activities and just do one part at a time, identifying the parts of the sentence, the functions of the words, and then identify the function of the phrase or whatever it's modifying. Or you can do vice versa. If you think identifying the phrase and what it's doing in the sentence is easier, then do that first and then identify the parts of the sentence. But like I said, I think finding the subject and the verb first helps me identify what that phrase is doing in the sentence. So now we can go into gerund phrases. We're going to add a little bit more information as to what you know about gerund phrases. So we already know that gerunds are verbals that act like nouns, but what's interesting is that a gerund phrase can also include a subject within the phrase itself. Here we have an example sentence, her being a teacher has improved test scores. So if we look at that phrase, we know our gerund is being and teacher is following being, meaning that teacher is the predicate nominative within the phrase. So now that we know those basics, we need to figure out what's going on with her. So let's separate the phrase from the sentence, and we can see that being is our gerund, teacher is our PN. What is being renamed by teacher, by the predicate nominative? Her. Her is our subject of the phrase. Notice that the subject of a gerund phrase will always be possessive. So if you notice something that's a little off about some of the phrases, maybe you're not sure if it's a participial phrase or a gerund phrase, just double check what that pronoun looks like or what that noun looks like. And then, of course, we know that the phrase itself, her being a teacher, is functioning as its own part of speech, as gerunds and gerund phrases are going to function as nouns. And in this sentence, her being a teacher is the subject of the sentence and completes the action of the verb has improved. Let's look at one more example of a gerund phrase. The trouble was the cats scratching the couch. Like I said in the previous examples, I like to find the subject and verb first. So our subject is trouble and our verb is was. So I can underline and double underline. And then we have our phrase, the cat's scratching the couch. We know that this is not modifying anything in this sentence. Instead, it's renaming what the trouble was. So this entire phrase is acting like a PN. But if we take that phrase away from the sentence and just analyze the phrase by itself, we have the cats scratching the couch. Notice how I included the word the, which comes before cats. It's super important for you to include all adjectives and articles within the phrase when you are analyzing the phrase by itself. Because if you don't include the, then that means that it's going to be modifying or functioning as something else in that sentence, and it really doesn't make sense for the to be out by itself outside of this phrase. So be sure you're paying attention to when the phrase actually begins. Sometimes it's not going to be right at the subject. Maybe there is a modifier before the subject that needs to be included. So now that we have our phrase taken out, we know that our gerund is scratching. That's our verbal. And couch is receiving the action of that verbal, making it the direct object of the phrase. And who or what is doing the scratching? The cat. The cat is completing the action, therefore it is the subject of our phrase. Now we're going to look at sentence diagramming with participial phrases to finish up this video. Here we have our sentence, delivering a package, the mailman rang the doorbell. Once again, I'm going to find my subject and verb first. Mailman is our subject, rang is our verb. And since we have an action verb, we most likely will have a direct object. What is receiving the action in this sentence? The doorbell. So I'm going to label that as a DO. And then we have a lot of other stuff going on in this sentence. So delivering a package, and then two articles, the and the. So delivering a package, we know now, is not going to be a gerund phrase. Instead, it's a participial phrase. It's modifying something. It's also got its own direct object. So I'm just going to label that first before we analyze what is being modified. What is being delivered? The package. Package is our direct object of the phrase. And then this entire phrase is modifying which mailman is being referred to. So I like to draw just a little arrow from the bracket to that subject, or the noun that's being modified. And then we also know that the is modifying mailman and the is modifying doorbell. So now we've identified pretty much everything in this sentence, and we can start making our diagram. We have our long line, and then we intersect that to have a subject and a predicate. And since we do have a direct object, we make a short little line like that. And then we have a participial phrase. So that means we're going to have a curved line. And since that phrase has a direct object, we're going to make it a little bit longer. And we're going to have a short line to show that there's a direct object. And since our direct object has a modifier, I need a short diagonal line coming off of that. Then we just have to fill in our other modifiers. We have one coming off the subject and one off of the direct object. And now we can finally start filling this out. We have our subject, verb, and direct object. And as per usual, these three words create the core of our sentence. Mailman rang doorbell. But we like to put in other words and phrases to make it sound a lot nicer and to flow more smoothly. So let's start with the very beginning. We have delivering as our participle. Delivering has a direct object, which is package, and package is being modified by a. And then, of course, we have two articles, one describing the subject and one describing the direct object. Both of them are the. And here we have our sentence, delivering a package, the mailman rang the doorbell. Pretty straightforward, and like I said, just take your time and identify what's going on within the phrase and then what the phrase is doing in the sentence, and you should be able to have no problems. If you have any questions about this or any other grammar, please contact the person who grades your grammar at the center.